eBay Motors and Fox Racing welcome you to episode 70 of The Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week, I talk with Scott Schloegel, the Washington, D.C.-based lobbyist for the Motorcycle Industry Council, the organization that works on behalf of U.S. manufacturers and distributors. Do you have the courage to learn about what goes on behind the scenes in Washington? Well then, stick around. But first, some words from those who pay our bills. Yes, it's The Lowdown. eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. With their new secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery, it's all built in. And eligible vehicle purchases are backed by up to $100,000 in protection. This is what modern car buying looks like. Get your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure purchases powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. In over 50 years of connecting riders to dirt, Fox Racing has learned that the best gear always has a discernible purpose and a strong point of view. The Ranger Defend and Recon Adventure collection takes a minimalist approach to product design, with a clear mission of providing everything you need in adventure-ready gear and absolutely nothing you don't need. Minimalist chassis, fully seam sealed with Gore-Tex waterproofing and D30 CE level protection across the board. This gear is every bit as pure as the adventure you're chasing. Scott, before we get into your the work you do with the MIC, Motorcycle Industry Council, let's establish your bona fides as an enthusiast. Now you're, as you just told me, you're a Michigan boy from birth, and you're actually in Michigan today. So take me through how you got into motorcycles or whatever you got into.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. So I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, right on the Michigan-Wisconsin border, kind of an hour north of Green Bay, Wisconsin. And back in the 70s, it seemed like every kid had a mini bike or a dirt bike, or then we got three-wheelers and things like that. And so I had one older brother. He ended up getting a Trail 70, which I called a grandpa bike. And then I got this little Kawasaki 75 back in 1975. And my dad happened to have gotten polio when I was about 3 years old. And so he could not walk, but he could pull his leg over a three-wheeler or pull his leg over the snowmobile. And so that was, power sports ended up really kind of being the way that we recreated with my dad, because he couldn't get out there and play basketball or soccer or baseball or football or any of that kind of stuff. He could throw a ball to you, but he couldn't run and catch it, right? Or go kick a ball or any of that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the basis for why I got into riding motorcycles and power sports back then. And it was really a great way to be able to, my dad eventually would, when we got four-wheelers, we'd strap chainsaws to the back of that, go out on our camp property and cut down a bunch of trees that we would use to heat the house in the winter with the wood. And it was just a great way to spend time with my three brothers and my dad.
I mean, that chainsaw on the back of a four-wheeler, that is you are the poster boy for the Upper Peninsula lifestyle, aren't you?
Exactly. Yeah. Throw in a little bit of flannel and we got it all there.
Oh boy, I can picture it. Well, take me through now. How does that kid way up there end up in Washington? And maybe you could take me through that progression.
Sure. So always was interested in politics, but never really, volunteered or did much in politics. When I was in college, I actually had an opportunity to do an internship out in Washington, D.C. And I originally got assigned to the White House Correspondence Office, but then had an offer from a public relations firm to come work at the PR firm. And that's where I ended up going. So I worked for a summer back in the 80s out in Washington, D.C., and was enamored with those folks that were kind of coming and going from the White House, being able to, and from the Capitol, and being able to kind of go in and be part of all those really amazing decisions that were going on in Washington. So I got bit a little bit by the bug there. And when I was getting ready to graduate from college, a guy from my hometown happened to be the state representative at the time and was looking for somebody to come work for him. And he was a Democrat. And I said, well, I'm kind of more of a Republican than a Democrat, but I'm really middle of the road on my issue, so I think I can work for you. So I went down and worked for him in Lansing for, I guess it was about 8 months. And then he ran for state senate and lost, worked for somebody else for 2 years. And then Bart, the guy that I originally had gone down to Washington or to Lansing to work with, decided to run for Congress. And so I helped him out in his congressional race. He won. I spent the first 4 years building his district operation, which was all of the upper peninsula of Michigan, and the northern half of the lower peninsula of Michigan was his congressional district. And then he had 3 different chiefs of staff in the first 4 years. Every time he let one go, he would say, "Do you want to come out and be my chief of staff? Do you want to come out and be chief of staff?" I finally said yes. My wife said, we didn't have kids at the time. And she said, "Oh, let's go out to the big city and do that for a year or two, and then he'll fire you and you'll be on to something else." So I did that and ended up being out there for another 14 years. So that was 18 years total, working in state, or for the congressman rather, 3 years in state legislature. And then President Obama's head of legislative affairs approached me about a position at the Export-Import Bank of the United States and asked if I would go over there. And so I took that appointment, did that for about 7 years. President Trump then came into office. I stuck around for 15 months, left there as the acting president and chairman of the board at the Export-Import Bank of the United States, and decided I wanted to follow my other real passion, which is power sports. And this job opened up. It was the first time in, I think, 40 years that the position had been open. Kathy Van Cleek, who was here before me, had worked for the associations for, I think it was 40 or 42 years, somewhere in there.
Wow.
So came over here and been here for, I guess, almost 8 years now.
Well, excuse my ignorance about how things work in the big city, but it seems that you were within government all those years, and now as a lobbyist for the MIC, you are sort of outside of it looking in. I mean, that must be an interesting perspective, having not across the aisle, but across the street, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it makes me a far better lobbyist or government relations person, having had that experience on both at the state level and on the Hill for as long as I was there, and then in the administration. The only thing I hadn't done was to work over in the House of Lords, the Senate. And having not worked over in the Senate, that was a little bit of a shortcoming, but you don't get a lot of people who have worked as long as I have in the various levels of government that I had worked in. And in fact, when I had interviewed at MIC, they were like, "You're way overqualified for this job. Are you sure you want it?" And I said, "It's not about the money. It's about the passion for power sports that I have." And, I was more than happy to come over here and do this. And I have loved working here.
Well, let's take the term lobbyist. I mean, it's hugely loaded, and as I said to you, makes me think of big oil or big tobacco or something nefarious, or packets of money being stuffed into pockets or something. So, I mean, how do you describe what you do?
Yeah. So it's a lot of shoe leather work. It's a lot of networking. It's a lot of understanding very diverse set of issues for the power sports industry in particular. So there is some of that, kind of being up and glad handing on the Hill and going to fundraisers. But to go to those fundraisers, you need to have a large PAC, a political action committee, as we call them. And MIC does not have a large PAC. We've got a small PAC. So I do some of those events, but for the most part, it's just getting in and building relationships with the legislators, with their staff, finding common interest and working on various issues. Those issues can be, they're extremely diverse. So you've got everything from working on the tariffs and the tariff proposals that you're seeing coming out of the United States now, to public lands access, to manufacturing tax credits, to PFAS chemicals and other chemical regulations that impact our industry, to hosting a fly-in in Washington, D.C., and bringing in executives from all around the country to come into Washington for 2 days and lobby the Hill and raise awareness about our issues that we've got.
I'm going to be blunt in this next question. Is it difficult to make politicians of any stripe give a shit about motorcycling or I mean, I guess you use the term you use is power sports because it's all sorts of stuff. But let's say motorcycling because that's our thing here. Is it hard to make them understand the significance, both economic and culturally, or are you viewed initially as this ultra niche little thing?
Yeah, so there are different aspects to motorcycling and power sports. And it's hard to find somebody who will understand all those aspects. And by that, what I mean is we have a congressional motorcycle caucus in the House and in the Senate over here. And the members that are part of those caucuses are typically on-road users. They're just on-road motorcyclists. There are a couple of folks who understand the off-road side of things and have done enduros and different competitions and things like that. But for the most part, they look at motorcycling as an on-road issue versus the off-road side.
Right.
The way that you get them to give a shit about it, as you said, is to explain to them the economics of power sports. We're about a $51 billion a year industry in the United States, which is nothing to sneeze at. Various states have significant components to that. So like Michigan, Minnesota, Texas, California, they all have a much larger, Georgia have a much larger footprint in the power sports industry from a manufacturing and distribution base.
Yes.
Yeah. So
now, where was I going to go with this? This is the beauty of being able to edit.
Yeah, well, I can go a little further if you'd like to just touch on, the outdoor recreation as a whole is about a $1.1 trillion a year industry.
This is where I want to go. So let me pick it up from here. Scott, so much has been made about the access to off-roading in various parts of the U.S., especially with the current Trump administration. Can you take us through what it was before, what was proposed, and then what you've been doing to try to change things? Can you take us through that whole story?
Yeah, well, from an off-road perspective, it really has been a challenge for us because you've seen, even most recently in this last battle with the One Big Beautiful Bill, you saw where Senator Lee and Congresswoman Celeste Malloy had proposed massive land sales of federal lands in the United States. And they were looking to sell off this land. And a lot of those lands that they were looking at selling off had riding areas on them for us, or they were access points to other riding areas for our folks. And so getting into those offices and explaining to them the impact that we have on the rural communities that they represent, like in Utah, I think they understand that somewhat. But then when you partner up with other folks who are even on the non-motorized side of things and who are a little bit more geared toward, say, boating and RVs and other aspects, those all have a significant impact, especially once you mosaic them together into the $1.1 trillion recreation economy that we have here in the United States. And so it's really about building coalitions with those other recreators as well. When you see an RV going down a rural road through Utah or through Wyoming, oftentimes they're towing a boat and they've got two dirt bikes that are strapped to the back of it and maybe an e-bike or two, or they've got a toy hauler that they've got that is filled up with some other things that are in there. And so it only makes sense for us to kind of get together and band together as a recreation industry as a whole, and to work with the non-motorized community as well. So when we first got into office, or when I first joined the associations, we were in the infancy of starting up ORR, which is the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. And ORR is exactly that. We are a roundtable of all of the outdoor recreation community getting together and advocating for public lands access, for additional funding for public lands. Take, for example, the Recreational Trails Program. We call it RTP here in the United States. There's all 50 states, as well as the District of Columbia, benefit from the Recreational Trails Program. And that's funded through gas tax dollars that every time we fill up our off-road vehicles or we fill up our vehicle and we're headed to an off-road site, There's a calculation that the economists are able to do here in the United States to kind of figure out how much we pay in gas tax dollars. And that money then is supposed to come back and go toward recreational trails. And for RTP right now, the latest figure I believe is 270 million is what we pay in every year for gas tax dollars for recreational vehicles. But we're only getting back 84 million of that for the RTP program. And so we're out there fighting for additional funding for the RTP, the Recreational Trails Program, to ensure that we can do more trail construction, trail maintenance, education, trailhead building, restrooms at trailheads, figuring out how to put in EV charging infrastructure at some of those locations as you see more of a transition that goes over toward electric vehicles. And so all of those issues become issues that so many in the recreation community can do and are interested in. And so we don't have to just do that as the motorcycle industry. We can partner up with these other folks like we do to ensure that we can make progress there. And even, I mentioned Senator Mike Lee and Congresswoman Malloy had this big proposal to sell off a bunch of land, hundreds or millions of acres of land as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. We were able to beat that back, and we were able to actually successfully get that knocked out of the bill because of that huge coalition that we had that all kind of got together and said, this is not right. We were also able to overturn a recent rulemaking that went on in Utah with the Glen Canyon recreation area out there, where they had shut down 25 miles of motorized trails that we were opposed to. The new administration came in. We did what was called a Congressional Review Act, which is CRA, Congressional Review Act, which is where Congress can say we disapprove of the rulemaking that the administration had done. And they overturned that rulemaking and opened up those 25 miles. So those are a couple of examples of how we kind of work together on motorized issues.
How significant was the proposed sell-off of public lands? I mean, depending on who you talk to. And I know I read Wes Seiler, who's a former motorcycle guy. I don't know if you know Wes or not. Writer for Outside Magazine. But he really painted a very bleak picture of what was happening. And I believe he lives in Billings or somewhere out there. Yeah. How significant was what was proposed, and what is the current state of that? You said you managed to knock it back, but did you knock it back 10% or give me a greater sense of the specifics, if you don't mind?
Yeah, great question. So it's not dead by any stretch of the imagination. Senator Mike Lee chairs the Energy and Natural Resources Committee over in the Senate, so he can at any time bring that up before his committee that he chairs and have additional hearings on the legislation, talk about it, what I would call softening up the issue, right? Kind of socialize it a little bit, have those hearings, have people talk about why it's necessary for some of this land to be sold off, and then take another bite at it in the next reconciliation bill, which I'm sure they're going to do before the end of this year, or try to pass something as a standalone bill. So he's really well positioned to kind of continue this fight. And I know he's going to continue that fight, which means that we're going to have to continue to oppose it. How big was it? It was big enough to where it would have had a significant impact on our industry. And we try to take a very reasonable approach to the way that we do our lobbying work. We don't go in there and just say, no, you can't sell off any federal land, because some of this stuff does make sense to sell off, right? There's some checkerboard squares of plots of land here and there that are isolated, and it might make sense to sell them off. There are certain needs. There's, one of them that they'll talk about is a high school that needs a football field, and there's federal land. There's a checkerboard piece of land that's adjacent to that school district.
You know what? Give them the football field. Give them the football field, but take everything else.
Right. Well, but then there's like housing, right? So it's like you can't get affordable housing in the St. George, Utah area. And so they're looking to do additional housing or for a water project there. And so it's like, where do you draw the line on those things? Number one. And number two, if those parcels are sold off, all of the revenue from that should come back to the recreation community, and there should be no net loss of trail network for the recreation community. That's our viewpoint. And so we understand that, yes, you may need to sell off certain parcels of land. And if you do that, let's do it in a transparent way. Let's have public input into the process. And then let's make sure that the funds that are generated as a result of selling that land off come right back into the recreation community.
Do you feel that the process of sort of shedding light on the specifics would go a long way towards slowing this process?
That's exactly what slowed it down, right? I mean, we had to raise the fact that there had been no hearings on it. There had been no discussions about what was going on with these lands. It was just wide swaths of land that there was not a detailed kind of plat map of all of the various parcels that they were looking at selling off. It was just kind of a nebulous thing. And that's why I say I think you're going to see Senator Lee come back at it and have a little bit more of a transparent process, so that will take that argument away from us. And then we have to just kind of, shift gears to another argument as to why we think it's a bad idea.
Just to play the devil's advocate for a moment. I mean, I guess you could say, I mean, and often with public lands, I mean, the notion of public is that all of us have access to it, and you may be a horseback rider, you may be a hiker or a mountain biker, and in the past, in certain regions, of course, there's been a real conflict between motorized use and non-motorized use of regions. Have you run into that in your experience as well?
All the time. And even within motorized, there's a conflict, right? Single track versus two track.
Right.
Should it be just dirt bikes and adventure bikes? Should it be side by sides and ATVs that are out there? Where do e-bikes fall on that spectrum of motorized or non-motorized? And we run into those issues all the time. And that's why the Coalition for Recreational Trails, we call it CRT, they're the ones that kind of lead. They're the tip of the spear on the recreational trails program reauthorization. And one of our staff people is a key senior leader on that coalition. So that we can work with the non-motorized section of it. And the beauty of RTP too is that 30% of the funding goes for motorized recreation, 30% for non-motorized recreation, and then the remaining 40% goes toward mixed use projects. And so that could mean that it's a horseback riding trail in the summer and it's a cross-country ski trail in the winter, or that it's a snowmobile trail in the winter and it's a dirt bike trail in the summer. Anything that's a mixed use between either seasonal mixed use or motorized, non-motorized mixed use. And RTP has done a lot to really help soften the edges of what both the motorized and non-motorized communities have had with regard to arguments in the past.
And I would think that the current threat has enabled you to pull together. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Let's go to on-road issues. And here, I was trying to think of sort of questions for you this morning, and things that. And I talked to Zach Kurlick, who's the managing editor of ADV Rider, and I said, "Listen, I'm talking to this guy from DC," and he said, "Lane splitting." Are you involved with issues regarding lane splitting? And does the MIC have an official sort of stance on lane splitting?
Yeah, the MIC does have a stance where they are supportive of lane splitting or lane filtering. So that, it's a bit of a semantic difference. Well, it's not so much just a semantic difference, but think of California as all out lane splitting, right? You can go between vehicles at just about any speed, at highway speed, and you can be between vehicles. Most of the states now that are moving toward some version of lane splitting are going what they call lane filtering. And lane filtering is where you have traffic that is moving at, say, 35 miles an hour or less, and it's largely slowed or stopped, and the motorcycle can go between vehicles at a speed that is no more than 10 miles per hour above whatever the existing speed is there. So you've seen states like Minnesota and Utah and other states that have gone to a lane filtering law recently, some with pretty good success, others with, not as good of success. When you look at California, it is part of that culture. They've been doing it for decades and decades and decades. And California drivers just know when they hear or see a bike, move over, give them enough room. They come through and then they close the gap back up. In other states where it's not been the law in the past and it hasn't been the practice in the past, it's a real fight for both education and for understanding the reasons for why lane filtering is important. So,
Well,
in the
why
past,
in the sorry to interrupt, but in the eyes of the MIC, why is it important?
so in historically in California, the reason that they allowed lane splitting was because they were all air-cooled bikes. Traffic was awful out there. You were sitting in high heat, and bikes would overheat and be broken down on the side of the road. And so they needed to kind of keep moving and have the air flowing through it. And that was kind of the historic reason for why lane splitting became as widespread as it was in
I
California.
didn't know that.
Still,
That's good to know.
yeah, yeah. Still, I don't think is on the books as a legal practice, but it is just ignored and it's just, accepted out there. And police do it as well as the regular folks. In other states, it becomes more of an issue, out in the Washington, D.C. area, for example. If I'm not in the HOV lanes that get to go at a nice clip and free flowing pace, for the most part, if you're in the main highway traffic, there's an awful lot of accidents that occur where, folks crash into the back of you. They're just not paying attention. It's stop and go traffic. They're hitting you. It's not as safe. It's better for traffic flow if you can get bikes moving out of that, because it means less congestion. And so that's been the argument that I think most folks use. Is it's less of a mechanical issue where we had air cooled bikes, and it's more of a safety issue now. And actually, MSF, the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, did what they call the MSF 100 study. And that study showed that there was no significant increase in states that had lane splitting versus lanes that don't have states that don't have lane splitting.
So increase in
with regard to crashes.
increase in injuries or accidents?
Crashes or injuries, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Because the public, I don't think you can. I mean, I just know where I live. In recent years, there's been roundabouts put into, as opposed to four-way stops.
Yeah.
And my God, that took long enough for people to figure that out. And, the notion of a filtering motorcycle, I think would be so far beyond many people's capability, unless, of course, there's really a serious public education component.
Yeah. Yeah, and roundabouts are an interesting thing too, right? Because I feel like I'm in Traverse City, Michigan right now, and they did the same thing where recently they've put in a bunch of those. And those folks that don't have any clue on how to drive in them and when to enter or not enter, it is the most awkward thing. But once people get used to it, it is the most natural that it works really pretty well, at least in my mind. I think it works pretty well. And that's similar to California model for lane splitting, right? I mean, it works well out there. It doesn't work in states as well that are new to it, but it'll come around.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. It's all thanks to their new secure purchase. Ever try to buy a car and end up in a parking lot with a stranger and some blind trust? Or spend half the day at the dealership talking to pushy salespeople and signing paperwork? Or maybe, worst of all, waiting for hours at the DMV just to transfer the title? Well, that era is over. For years, eBay has been the go-to for gearheads, collectors, and do-it-yourselfers. Because whatever you're into, from classics to SUVs to trucks to imports, eBay's got it. And now with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your next ride, it's where you can buy it, start to finish. Sellers and titles are verified, paperwork is handled by experts, and payments are traceable and digital. So you know exactly who you're dealing with and exactly what you're getting. Plus, you can finance, insure, and register your vehicle all in one place. No more hours at the dealership, no more trips to the DMV. Get your vehicle plates and paperwork shipped to your door, ready to drive. And it's all part of one seamless process designed to feel as easy as buying anything else online. And eligible vehicles purchased on eBay are backed by up to $100,000 in purchase protection. Thinking about selling your ride? Secure purchase makes that simple too, because you know your buyer and their funds are verified. If you still owe on your car, the financing payoff is fully integrated, so you're not chasing paperwork or waiting on checks to clear. And with secure purchase, you get paid fast. And you're not going to be stuck chasing no-shows or answering the fifth, "Is it still available?" message. This is what modern car buying looks like. Skip the DMV, skip the sketchy meetups. buy it on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. In over 50 years of connecting riders to dirt, Fox Racing has learned that the best gear always has a discernible purpose and a strong point of view. The Ranger Defend and Recon Adventure Collection takes a minimalist approach to product design, with a clear mission of providing everything you need in adventure-ready gear and absolutely nothing you don't need. Minimalist chassis, fully seam sealed with Gore-Tex waterproofing and D30 CE level protection across the board. This gear is every bit as pure as the adventure you're chasing. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. In California, of course, you can take Waymos, these autonomous vehicles, which are replacing Ubers. I haven't been in one, but apparently it's really freaky just sitting there by yourself while this car drives you. Now, what about motorcycling and autonomous vehicles? And I know when it first became, years ago when we were aware that this was coming, although there was no specific timeline, the real concern was the compatibility of autonomous vehicles with motorcycles, that they wouldn't see us, that the two, and I remember one expert was saying that, well, motorcycling in the future would be on closed courses like racetracks. That was the only place you could really go to ride a motorcycle. Take me through that and what your experience has been with that.
There's a lot that's being done on the kind of new frontier of autonomous vehicles. And I think when you look at Teslas, for example, there's been some very high profile crashes involving Teslas where they had switched over, I think, from a radar system to more of a visual camera based system. And they think that that's why some of those crashes were occurring. But the vehicle to vehicle, V2V communications, the V2X communications, they call it, which is vehicle to everything. So the other infrastructure, to stoplights, to turn walk signs, to you name it out there. That technology is advancing significantly. But one of the main things that we have been pushing for as those advances go is that they always have to be tested for motorcycles. And they need to be tested to ensure that vehicles are not turning left in front of motorcyclists, that they're not coming over on them and not seeing them well. And even in my vehicles, which have, the little lights on the side view mirrors and things like that, most of the time those light up, but occasionally you'll get something where it just doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't pop when a motorcycle is nearby. So really a priority for us. And actually last year, Congress passes every 4 or 5 years a transportation highway bill. As part of that, they have a congressionally mandated motorcyclist advisory council, which is made up of all kinds of different folks from the motorcycling community. It can be the manufacturers, it can be the safety training folks, it can be various folks from state legislators, and so it's prescribed, or legislatures and state departments like the Department of Highway Vehicles or Motor Vehicles. And so the MAC was established again several years ago. Took a long time for them to actually name the panel, the members who are going to be on the Motorcyclist Advisory Council. And last year, Secretary Buttigieg named me as one of those panel members. And our job is to take a look at the entire motorcycle safety community. And it's everything from road infrastructure to the vehicle-to-vehicle communications that you're talking about, to tar snakes and better ways to put up guardrails that aren't going to decapitate folks if they go down and they're sliding along on the highway, and lighting systems to better illuminate or notify you of curves that are coming up and stuff like that. And so that's actually a really, really good source for us to be able to give input on the new vehicle technologies, the autonomous vehicle technologies. Unfortunately, they had contracting issues toward the end of last year and weren't able to actually have our first member of the MAC, or our first meeting of the MAC. And the new administration has put all what they call FACAs, Federal Advisory Council Act, commissions on hold for the moment. So while I'm technically a member of the MAC, we haven't yet met to go through our recommendations and kind of raise issues. But autonomous vehicles are one of those issues that will be addressed when the MAC does meet.
I would think that the large vehicle manufacturers are probably irked at motorcycles, I would think, because I assume there would be a lot of technological changes in whatever, they have within their vehicles to find us and spot us. And of course we move quickly and we move from here to there quickly. And is it, and I guess this is a more broadly, a broader question to you, which is that, do people kind of roll their eyes when they see you coming in? It's like, oh, the motorcycle guy, not again. Or are you taken seriously?
Definitely taken seriously. I don't think people, well, you also have, like, keep in mind, we're on the manufacturer, dealer, distributor, aftermarket parts, allied trade side of it. We're not the rider side of it. So you've got the AMA or the
Yeah, of course,
MRF
yes.
or Abate that kind of come in there on some of those rider issues, and kind of the, the leather vest guys who kind of come into the building and have those discussions. For us, it's a different tone, because it's like, okay, it's the manufacturing side. We want to make sure that we're getting things right. And when you look at the folks who are doing the technology for, like, vehicle to vehicle communications, a lot of the technological advancements that have come out for both motorcycles and autos, companies like Bosch, they are, they're on both sides of the ledger. So they're on the auto side, and their stuff's on the autos and it's on the motorcycles.
Exactly.
And so I don't see so much of that fight with regard to, kind of not understanding the technology, or that it being a pain in the butt.
Michael Ullaric, who's a regular guest on this podcast, who watches the industry. Last week he was saying that, and he was kind of grumpy about it, which he occasionally gets grumpy. But he was saying that in many parts of the world, like, for instance, I remember reading Australian motorcycle news. You open it up, and on the inside of the thing, they have motorcycle sales in Australia. Every make, model, right down to they sold 4, PW50 Yamahas or something. Now, the MIC has a very different view of this. And I know that maybe this is not your corner of the MIC to discuss, but I have to ask, since I've got you here. The MIC is very secretive about this stuff. And why is that? Why is it not sort of, because the numbers were leaked, and I know that it's many thousands of dollars to join your organization if you're not a manufacturer. One number I saw was $15,000 plus a $5,000 annual, so it's very expensive. But the MIC seems very secretive of this sort of stuff, and why is that?
Yeah. So membership, just by way of background, membership is really based on the size of your business and how much you are doing in sales. So let's say you're a startup motorcycle company that is just coming out with, let's say, a new EV electric bike. Your membership fee could be as low as like $3,500 a year. So, however, almost all of the major manufacturers are members of MIC, with the exception of Harley, is not a formal member of MIC. They're a member of MSF, the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, but not MIC. The reason that we do that, it really is a member benefit. So when when OEs join our association, they can participate in our motorcycle sales study. And if they're not a member, say Harley Davidson, for example, is not a member, they can pay what is a very significant fee to also participate in that study and provide their sales data to us, and then we give them the sales data back. So,
and do you know if Harley does that?
They do. Yeah, they participate in that.
So they're cherry picking. They don't want to become a real member. They just want to do that.
They want the data. They want the tire sales data and things like that kind of are good indicators for our industry. So I really wish they would become a full member with us, but they were a member prior to, back in, I think it was the 70s, whenever it was that AMF kind of bought them out, and then they went through their bankruptcy. And when they came through bankruptcy, they never joined back into MIC again once they came out of bankruptcy. So, but we do provide that information through our statistic annual report that we put out. but it's aggregated. So it'll say this is how many were done in adventure bikes, this is how many were done in cruiser
Right.
style for,
Right.
you name it, the various segments. But we don't break it down on a company by company basis for non-members.
It's interesting though that how it varies with market around the world, isn't it? I mean, that in itself, the lack of consistency is interesting. Plus, it's fun to know.
Yeah.
I think just for most of us who are enthusiasts, it's like, well, how many of those did they sell?
Right.
And I'm just being nosy. I know that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Harley came out with their numbers recently, I think, right? And you saw kind of the numbers on the electric side, on the EV side being nowhere near where they wanted it to be. And I think some of their other numbers are coming out a little bit better, but still being challenged. So, and I think now Honda is the number one sales in the United States. So
CRF 300L, folks, but you didn't hear it. You didn't hear it here. Take me through, if you don't mind, just some of the other things that you might be working on that I'm probably not aware of. Obviously, I have very much an outsider's view of your work, and maybe you could take me through some of the things that are of significance to you right now.
sure, yeah, motorcycle safety issues are always top for us. They're a big issue for us. There were 6,335 people killed in 2023 on motorcycles. There was a 44% increase in deaths amongst 15 to 20-year-olds.
Wow.
And so figuring out
44% increase.
44% increase, yeah, in 2023.
15 to 20-year-olds. Oh.
Yeah. So, which is really unfortunate. The one thing I haven't been able to get out of NHTSA is what National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is whether or not that includes e-bicycles or on-road, let's say side-by-sides or ATVs, and people, using those improperly and being on road with them. But
Right.
nonetheless, that's a big issue for us, is the safety issues. PFAS chemicals I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, can you explain? I wasn't sure I totally understood that. If you could break that down.
So PFAS chemicals are perfluoral and polyfluoral alkyl substances. These are called forever chemicals. They are in everything from dental floss to sweat wicking technology in your shirt to gaskets, hoses, bump stops, tire valves, all kinds of different things. And PFAS chemicals were originally invented kind of as a miracle type substance where it's super resistant to oils and different chemicals. It's super resistant to heat and cold temperatures. And so